climate change and the threat to our biosphere. Do you see a way for post-theists to lead people like yourself and me and your people you've mentored? What's a way that people who are currently stepping out of traditional religion into this uncharted territory of post-theism, what advice would you give us about what to do with our time and our energy?
Well, what I've tried to do over the last 30 years or so is simply lecture. I give lectures and seminars. I'm still doing it, but not so many now because of my age. But I suppose we've got to acknowledge that there's a limit to what any one person can do at any time. But try to give leadership and understanding. Where one can, but I'm in several groups who have formed as a result of the sort of failure of the church to do this. And Sea of Faith. Have you heard of the Sea of Faith group?
Yes.
We have a Sea of Faith group in New Zealand. We have other groups called Ephesus, and we meet in groups about fortnightly and have discussions and so on. So, but I don't think it is any obvious answer. We've just got to work where we are and be as open-minded as possible and try to build bridges, which isn't easy.
Right. I think it is. My impulse as well is to work locally, to develop communities who put their convictions into action in the world in small ways, seemingly insignificant ways. I mean, as you said, no one of us or even small group of us can solve the world's problems. And as I said, we're in the middle of an election cycle here, and I'm aware, so acutely how little even, the President of the United States is able to accomplish, with an obstructionist Congress and all of the political influences and money and big corporations. I mean, it's impossible for any one person or group of people or even a politician to it's going to take cooperation, and it seems like we're at a stage in human history that we've increased our ability to cooperate, but we have a ways to go on that right now.
Very much so, yes. And of course, although we live a long way from the States, of course, what's happening in the States is of great interest to us, because seeing the States being the most powerful country in the world, what happens in leadership, of course, affects all the other countries. And I would like to see the United Nations change. I think the Constitution of the United Nations is now, unfortunately, so dated. It represents what the world was like when it was formed, and just as the old League of Nations became dated and by the time of World War II rather useless, so the United Nations should grow into a world parliament where to which all countries surrender their own sovereignty, which they're not, and of course the big ones are not at all willing to do that.
Right.
But that's the ideal, and that each country has the number of votes, according to its population size, and so that would mean that the United States would still have a big vote, but then China would have an even bigger vote in that case. So I don't see any move in this direction at all, but I assume that only some blowout cause humanity to arrive at something better. One of the things that worries me, well, among the many actually, is that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer all the time, not only within nations, but particularly between nations. And you see, money is going to determine who is the next president of the United States is, by the look of it.
Right.
And this is a very worrying situation for a democracy. We're no longer a true democracy because we don't we let money decide who will be there.
Yeah, it does worry me as well. I mean, among the secular organizations that I'm a part of, there are sort of two sort of streams. One is represented by people like Steven Pinker, who have written that the world is far more peaceful and cooperative than it's ever been in human history, and he marshals a great deal of evidence, and it's very convincing. On the micro scale, like the length of time of one person's lifetime, for example, it does seem that we go, the oscillations between cooperation and hostility, are quite apparent, and so it's tough to keep that long view that things are becoming more peaceful and more cooperative, and that we'll probably, when faced with our own extinction, become more adaptable to new ways of being in the world together. But certainly on the day-to-day and the month-to-month and the year-to-year type of scale, it can be quite discouraging. Which makes me think that our own individual stories and our own individual lives actually matter quite a bit. That's really ultimately all we have, is what we do with our own one life and the one influence that we have, and which is why I appreciate a long, faithful career like you've had, which has been, in my view at least, and my brief introduction to you and reading your work, committed to this idea of pursuing truth, pursuing what's good for all of humanity. And I think the measure of that influence can't be measured within your own lifetime. It'll be many lifetimes before we know the kind of influence that you've had. Which I just wanted to say that to you, and also then to ask you which people have been most influential in that way to you over the years.
Well, strange as it may seem, I would want to say I owe a tremendous amount to the church. Mm-hmm. It not only did it give me a purpose to live for, but it helped me to understand the highest values to live by and to learn to live by them. And I am sorry in many ways that the whole structure of the church is in a state of decay at the moment, without producing the kind of societies or groups which do the same sort of thing. And so I haven't any particular people, although I mentioned some in the book that you mentioned, right, who have influenced me. But apart from those, I find I've tried to respond to the ideas that have come my way in the best way I can, and that's not always been easy, of course, but still, it's I find that very gratifying. As I reach this age, I'm amazed at what I've been able to see and experience. You see, when I was young, I grew up in the aftermath of the Great War. We believed we had already fought the last war. Everything that was going on, a great future ahead of humankind. We had the League of Nations, which would make sure there were no more wars. technology. I mean, radio was just coming in when I was a boy, and of course, never heard of television. And in fact, I thought television was impossible as a boy. I couldn't see how it could be done at all. And we were establishing. The future seemed marvelous. Well, that's all changed now. At the end of and then now we've entered the 21st century, and the future now has all sorts of clouds on the horizon, from global warming to the destruction of the biosphere and so on. So it seems to me a great tragedy, and I don't see any clear answer to it.
Who would you?
Much as I would like to.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. I think we have to search far and wide for these signs of optimism, and certainly science and technology are providing some hope for ways that we can avert disaster, while others are telling us that it's already too late, ultimately, to save the climate. But there are people working day and night on this, and I sort of have a maybe naive but hope in the ingenuity and creativity of human beings. If you had to point to people who are currently working, perhaps in their prime, both in the area of science and technology, but also in the area of post-theism, of humanism, who would you point to as sort of carrying the baton on from where you've been to where you see this conversation and this effort moving? Like who would you recommend that we pay close attention to in your experience, and younger people that are coming up behind you that give you some hope?
Yes, that's hard to answer that, really. In the end, I sometimes go back to Teilhard de Chardin, and who said, if he were to lose his faith in God and his faith in Christ, he would still have faith in the world. Yeah,
I love that quote.
But that he meant the totality of life on this globe. And I think, in that respect, I think the sort of desires for good just outweigh in the human mind the selfish things that pull us back. So that I agree with you when you said that there is still within the human species the will to solve these problems, and I certainly hope that for the benefit of my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that will come about. But of course, at the moment, it's going to be a touch-and-go struggle, I think, this century.
I agree with you. It's hard to see the hope at times, and but I love that you point forward to your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids, and I think that's what we all, at the end of the day, like Desjardins, like if we lose faith in these metaphysical ideas, we hold on to hope and faith in our kids, which is the small way of saying the world, and that's where so much of my faith actually lies, is the ability of my children and their friends and colleagues to create a better world for themselves and for all of us. Yeah, we can only hope, right?
Well, yes, and have faith. You see, faith is tremendously important for the human condition. We've all got faith of some kind. Some have more faith than others, and some have faith in idols, but it's just a bit of a disaster. But nevertheless, faith is important to the human condition, because we all look forward to the next day, and with expectation that something will be better than it was today, and so on. So that's in my last few years that's how still approach things too. But I'm